I'll just tell you what my plan is, and we'll go from there. My plan is to talk about ships, and I mean by that predominantly relationships. Relationship in the church, to the Lord, to our family, friends, on the job, in every direction. And so I probably won't get through all of them. If I don't, then we'll take a break for a while, then I'll come back later and deal with another one. But what I want to talk about, somebody said, well, what's so important about relationships? Well, unless you're on the island all by yourself, or unless you go to Alaska and you backpack to some isolated place where you don't see another human being, good or bad, we all have to deal with people. If you're married, you deal with a spouse. If you have children, you deal in a family situation. If you have a job, you're dealing with other people on the job. You're dealing with extended family. You're dealing with friends. You're dealing with people that you come in contact with on a regular basis, and you're dealing with people you come in contact with infrequently, but we're all dealing with people. Now, everybody gets tired of that to some degree. There's a great preacher that I love to read after, most preachers do, A.W. Pink. But he got so antisocial and so sick of people that eventually he went to the Isle of Lewis, which is an isolated island in Britain, and just isolated himself for the rest of his life. And didn't even go to church. He thought all churches had got apostate, and isolated himself. So that is the extreme, but that's not what we're going to be able to do. So for better or worse, we have relationships, and we have to deal with them. I wrote this down as a way of introduction. There's 3 different relationships that we'll have to deal with. We'll have to deal with relationships in our community. Now, there's 3 areas there. Basically, that deals with husband and wife, your companion. It deals with your children, grandchildren. It deals thirdly with your circle of influence, the people that are friends, the people that you work with on a daily basis, the people that you are friends with and you see on a weekly or daily basis. So we have our relationship in the community. Then second thing is our relationship to the church. Then thirdly, our relationship with Christ. So there's 3 different areas that we want to deal with as far as our relationship. When you talk about the relationship to the church, we're going to talk about membership and why membership is important and why sometimes it gets ridiculous in local churches on membership. Sometimes you have people that haven't been there in 30 years, and you have people that don't give, you don't have come. And yet we think it's okay in membership. And yet if you are a member of any civic organization, there's requirements to be a member of that. So there's requirements, there's rewards, there's reasons for membership. And we're going to talk about membership and what God expects out of someone who's a member of a church. We're going to talk about stewardship, giving of our time, our talents, and of course our money. Then we're going to talk about discipleship. Growing in the Lord, not being stale, not staying still, and not just floating down the river, but actively serving the Lord, growing in grace and knowledge. And the thought there would be, where are we spiritually compared to where we were last year, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, ever how long you've been saved, been in church, you can continue to go back. Has there been any growth? You know, sometimes you'll see somebody that, a child or something that's not growing, they say they've got stunted growth. We've heard that expression. Sometimes there's stunted growth spiritually. Then we're going to talk about our relationship with the Lord, and that involves 3 things. That involves our fellowship with Him. It involves worship to Him, and involves the lordship of Him. And so those 3 ways. So there's a lot of ships that we're going to try to cover, and I don't know how many we are going to cover. Before I get into it this morning, if you were to give me some feedback on personally what area you would love me to deal with of all these, what would be something that would be of interest to you? I'll take a swig of water while you think. That was very insightful. I appreciate the comments. That will help me as we go along.
All right, how about discipleship?
Discipleship is a wonderful one. I think we neglect that a lot.
A lot.
We do. Anybody else?
Stewardship.
Stewardship, okay. We're going to deal with several of those. Today I'll start off by relationship. How to deal with people. Some people are easy to get along with. Some people are difficult to get along with. Some people you're around all the time. And some people you're around occasionally. but we deal with all different personalities, types, and temperament. The Bible says, if we have a verse to jump off from, it would be 2 Corinthians 5, verse number 17. Therefore, if any man be in Christ, he's a new creature. Old things are passed away, and behold, all things have become new. A lot of times what you'll hear from somebody is, well, I act the way I act because that's just who I am. If they're outward and impulsive, or if they're shy and introverted, or if they are mean-spirited and sarcastic, whatever, they say, well, I just can't help it. Well, we're going to look at why people act the way they act and how you can learn to effectively deal with people as they are. But the situation is, don't ever say, okay, well, my mama was this way, my daddy was this way, I inherited this as the way I grew up because I have to act this way. Salvation, the Spirit of God can change anything and everything.
That's right.
Yeah, I've seen it change people who were cruel to be kind. I've seen it change people that were stingy to be liberal in their giving. I've seen it change people who wouldn't talk to anybody who would now share their faith in God. I've seen it change people who didn't want to come to church to people that couldn't wait to come to church. So it changes everything. There was a book years ago, Tim LaHaye. Dr. Tim LaHaye went to be with the Lord a couple of years ago, well in his 90s. He was best known, great prophecy preacher, best known for the Left Behind series. Everybody's heard about those. Him and Jerry Jenkins were co-authors of the Left Behind series. He wrote a book many years ago, and it's called Transformed Temperaments. Basically, everybody is one of 4 different types of people. Sometimes there's a combination of them. And let me share them with you. Over the years of pastoring, I've seen this. I've seen difficult people, and you've got to figure out how to deal with them. John Maxwell, who's a great leadership guy, wrote books on leadership. When he was in his first church, he was known as a great people person, and he's probably the preeminent writer on leadership in the world today, Christian or secular. And big companies have him come and talk to them. Well, he was in his first church right out of Bible college in a little country church in Indiana. And so they would have business meetings. The men would get together. I don't know if it was an elder or deacon meeting or just the men. They would get together and discuss business. Well, the church had been a country church. They've been used to doing things a certain way all those years. He's energetic. He comes in. He wants to do some things different. He wants to try some things. And so every time that he would broach a subject on something, he would notice the men would kind of look to one individual. And if the guy was on board, then they were on board. If the guy seemed like he wasn't on board, then they took a step back. And so he thought, well, how am I ever going to deal with this situation? And so we thought, well, can I just, bypass him? Well, that didn't work. Well, can I just go ahead, and if he's for it, fine. If he's against it, fine. That didn't work. So finally come to the conclusion, I got to deal with this guy. Whether I like it or not, I've got to deal with this guy. He is a strong-willed, hard-headed individual who wants his way. And so how's the church going to go forward? Should I resign, go somewhere else, just consign the church to do nothing? So here's what the idea he had. He said, I'll befriend this guy. And so during the week, he'd go by and talk with him. I can't remember if the guy was working, retired. Talk with him, befriend him. And here's what he did. He learned, in talking to the guy, he said, hey, I got an idea about something we might could do. And began to share those ideas. And eventually the guy said, you know what, that's not a bad idea. And so he said, well, why don't you bring it up the next time we meet? And so the next time they met, this guy who everybody looked to would bring it up. It was Brother Maxwell giving him the idea, but the guy took it as his own, began to bring the idea up. Everybody was in favor. They went forward. Now, of course, he could have been headstrong, as sometimes we are, and just said, bless God, whether he likes it or not, I'm going to do it. And it would have went nowhere. But we all got to deal with people. So there's 4 different types of people in the world, and you'll see that in the Bible. And we'll see a Peter, we'll see a Paul, we'll see a Moses, and we'll see an Abraham. Sometimes people call it, in the secular world, type A personality, type B personality, type C personality, type D personality. The old Greeks would call them a sanguine, a choleric, melancholy, and a phlegmatic personality. And let me show you these personalities. You'll kind of see them as we go along. The first one, the type of person you're going to have to deal with, is a sanguine or type A personality. This is the car salesman. This is the guy that loves everybody. This is the guy that's going to go out of his way to talk with you. This is the individual that just loves to do things. In the Bible, it's a Peter. Peter's that way. You'll find Peter before the Lord Jesus really kind of puts Peter in control of the early church. When the disciples are called, the disciples are already looking to Peter. He's a natural born leader. Now, he is impulsive. He runs his mouth. He jumps in head first when he doesn't think about it. But he's a natural born, likable guy that people seem to follow. After he is saved, after he's filled with the Spirit, you'll find a completely different Peter. Yes, he's all the things he was, but he's completely different. The second one we'll talk about is a choleric. That's the Apostle Paul. Now, Paul, like Peter, is an outgoing personality. They'll go out of the way to meet you, shake hands with you, talk about things and all of that. The difference is Paul is more of a headstrong, strong-willed personality. You're going to be hard-pressed to find anybody that doesn't like Peter. Everybody likes Peter. You may shake your head sometimes and say he did a stupid thing. Everybody likes Peter. Not everybody's going to like Paul. Not everybody's going to like him. But Paul's a people person. In fact, when you read the letters that Paul wrote, almost every time you come to the end of a book, Paul throws out name after name after name of people that he's mentoring, that's following him, that's his associate, people that he's involved with, even more than Peter. You find Paul that way. Paul's a strong-willed. He is a leader. He is a headstrong individual. He can be sarcastic. He can be a little bit difficult to get along with. He can be the type that says, I told you we're not bringing John Mark. And you got a Barnabas who's a very likable guy, and they have it out so that they split company over this. That's the Apostle Paul. And yet he wrote 14 books of the New Testament and influenced the New Testament like nobody else did. Mm-hmm. Then you got the reserved personalities. You've got the melancholy. That's Moses. Moses is up here at one moment. Lord, we're having a great time. The next moment, God, would you kill all of them? He's up and down. Almost, and for those of you who are musicians, almost every musician I know is melancholy. Melancholies are emotional, moody individuals. And for those of us who are married to them, may we say amen right there. That's their personality, okay? They are creative. They are very innovative. They're the type, if you're, as a lady, you're going to fix a church up for something, they're creative in that. They're very innovative type people. And so many times high IQ, not always, but sometimes high IQ, okay? Then you've got the phlegmatic, the calm, cool, collected guy that nothing bothers him or upsets him. I'm a little bit that way, not as much that way, so some things upset me. Illustration of that is Abraham. Abraham doesn't seem to get flustered by much. He doesn't seem to be up here much or down there much. He's just flat-lining it most of the time. Illustration of this is, and we've all heard illustration, but I remember when my mom, a typical woman, is emotional. Nothing wrong with that because we need emotion. Not everybody needs to be. But, you know, she can be more of emotional. Well, when the grandkids come along, the first one come along, Travis come along, he was 2 or 3 years old, and we had some chairs around the dining table that had the spindles in the back of them, okay? You know what I'm talking about? Well, Travis thought it'd be a great idea to stick his head through the spindle.
Oh, no.
Well, I don't know, the boy's not right there, but he thought it'd be a great idea. Well, he did, and of course he could not get his head out. Well, my mother went berserk. Here's the grand boy, and he's struggling to get out, and he's in the chair. And she says, get something, let's destroy the chair, let's cut the chair, get a saw or something. I said, whoa, let's wait a minute, okay? Let's get some Dawn dishwashing liquid, let's put it on his neck and beside his head, and let's see if we can calm him down first. We don't need everybody upset. You go to the other room for a moment, and let's see if we can get him out. Well, you know what happened? It slid on out. The chair was not destroyed. A preacher friend of mine, his wife, and this was dealing out, it was their child, a grandchild, Brother Steve Moore's wife, accidentally locked the child in the car. You know, put the child in the car. They were somewhere and locked the door. The keys was in there, and the child was in the car, and she couldn't get to it. Well, what did she do? She broke a window. Now, the child was not dying, and it was not that hot, and she could have called, and her husband said, why didn't you call me? I could have brought a key and all those things. But going back to it, you got the phlegmatic, he's calm, cool, he's not going to get flustered, he's going to think things out. So those are the 4 basic personality types of people that you'll have to deal with. And we've all seen it in working with people. There's some people that's easy to get along with, some people hard to get along with. We had a church one time that I was pastoring, and for some reason, and it was a great ministry, but we had some headstrong people, and they all happened to be women. I'm not trying to fuss at you women, that just happened to be the case. And I mean, very headstrong. The husbands were more passive, and the ladies were just headstrong. One of them was a deacon's wife, and he was a treasurer, and he was a great guy. In fact, and the story ends well because I preached both of them's funeral. No, it's not bad. They come across bad, didn't they? No, they both ended up liking me. We had a great time. But anyway, we go to church, and so, I mean, we began to grow pretty fast. It was in a suburban Atlanta area. We began to grow pretty fast. And the fellowship hall, the church was huge. The church seated 500, the choir seated 100. And, but the fellowship hall was tiny, tiny, tiny. And so we began to grow. It was fine in church because we had plenty of room. Fellowship hall, man, we couldn't have anything. Anything we had to rent another building. We had to go 5 miles away and rent a building for the Christmas, for any kind of thing, because we couldn't get everybody in the fellowship hall. And so we began to think about, well, we didn't want to expand right then, but how do we, this fellowship hall, get things out? Well, they had a big old table in there that took up a tremendous amount of room that really wasn't serving any purpose whatsoever, in there. And so we're trying to figure out, well, how do you put the tables this way or that way to get more people in there to make it practical? And so we was in there during the week. I said, well, let's take this table out. It's not serving a purpose, taking up room. It was ugly too. It didn't fit in with the rest of the tables. It was an old wooden table. The rest of them were, regular tables back there. So we took it out and tried to redesign it. Well, that next Sunday, I guess some of the ladies or somebody went there and didn't like the fact that we had changed it. And so they go to this lady, they didn't themselves have the guts to come to me, but they knew she would. So, I think it's after church on Sunday morning. So, can we meet with you? Okay. Well, they come in there. Well, he's sitting there, she's sitting there. And man, I get blistered, And it was one of those moments, unfortunately, that I wasn't the calm, cool, collected individual. And so I just didn't take it well, man. She was just blistered for something that was ridiculous. And she said that table's going to be back in there. Well, now, she shouldn't have said that. If she'd have went about the right way, we could have had a wonderful conversation, But, how would you like it? If somebody said it's going to be that way, if it's not going to be that way, we're going, well, I didn't take it too good. So I just basically looked at her and I said, ma'am, I don't know where that table's going to be. I said, it may be on the roof. It may be in the trash can out back, but it's not going to be in there. And so she got up and left. Well, Sunday night, she come back and apologized. She loved me the rest of the time, probably as much or more than anybody that was there. Okay, that's not the way you always deal with people, but with her, who was she wasn't a Yankee, but she had a Yankee personality, headstrong individual. You know how you have to deal with people like that? You have to hit them head on. They enjoy that, they like that, they respond to that. Now, if the individual had been a laid-back personality, it could have been entirely different. I'm not suggesting that's the way you deal with everything, but I'm telling you, it turned out well. So you're going to deal with all kind of people. If you work jobs, you deal with all kind of people. Missy talked about people on the job. You'll deal with ladies that come in there, guys that come in there, nurses, they're just bubbly. They're just happy about everything. Some are going to be cranky. Some are going to be very proficient and very professional and not engage with the people, all kind of people. Well, how do you, in a relationship, deal with people? Let's bring it. For example, I got to think of the 4 Gospels. When you read the 4 Gospels, you can see 4 different personalities. Now, God superimposed and inspired these men, but you see their personality. You've got, if you were to tell somebody that's lost, wanting to know about God, which Gospel to read, which one would you tell them? John. John is the simplest. John is the most heartwarming of all the Gospels. Okay, you got Matthew. What is Matthew? Matthew's a Jew. Matthew was a tax collector. Matthew is a businessman. When he writes his book, it has a Jewish flavor to it. You've got the parables, you've got mysteries. Sometimes you're scratching your head. When you come to Mark, Mark had a Roman father. You got a book that's written from a more Roman personality. Get the job done. The shortest gospel. It's short, sweet. When he writes about things that Matthew and Luke and John writes about, he uses half the words to write about it. He gets to it. When you come to Luke, who is Luke? Luke's a doctor. Maybe a Gentile, maybe a Jew. There's a big discussion about that. But he's a doctor. So when you come to him, you're spending the first couple of chapters with a genealogy. He's going to go into detail about every single thing. But when you come to John, John is melancholy. John is all about the heart. He's going to lean his head upon the breast of the Lord Jesus. So he writes a heartfelt gospel. He writes one that is simple to understand. So you see the personalities that come through. Now let's look at 4 different people that I mentioned and see the bad qualities and how God changed those bad qualities into good qualities. First of all, let's look at Peter. I was trying to think of people that you may know to show you difference. Okay, I got 2. You got the 2 outgoing personalities. They're different, but they're same. You got Peter and you got Paul. Some of you know these people, some of you don't. Everybody will know the first one. The first one is, well, the names escape me now. Oh, yeah, okay. Mark Stroud, he is Peter. Dean McNeese is Paul. Okay, let me show you the difference. Peter is just going to jump in anything head first. A couple years ago at Redfield, we was at the meeting up there, it rained one night horrible, and we're parking people in the fields, and people are getting stuck right and left. I mean, it was a horrendous situation. You got 1,000 people on the tent, and they're trying to leave, and everybody's getting stuck, and they're pushing, they're pulling. Brother Mark, okay, has got his suit on. When I look over at him, he's rolled his britches legs up to there, he's took his shoes off, and he's out there pushing a vehicle in a suit. Okay? That's Peter. He's an active type personality. He's going to do something. He's not going to sit there and think, well, I'm going to get what's my wife going to say when I come home with this mud on my suit and all that. He's just going to jump into it head first. You get a Paul. Okay, you know what Dean was doing? Dean was telling so-and-so to go get a tractor. So-and-so to get this and get that, to push and pull them out. Okay. Both of them got people out. But their personality did it in a different way. Whereas you would have had the phlegmatic that would just sit back in a chair and say, that's horrible, isn't it? I hope I don't get stuck out there. Maybe they'll get out somehow. So let's come to Peter. Okay, here's the negatives of a type person like Peter. They're impulsive. They're the type people that preacher says, okay, because somebody volunteered for this, they're going to throw their hands up and they haven't thought about it. They're going to automatically volunteer. They may think about, well, man, I don't know why I volunteered to give that money. I'm broke. I don't have the money. But they're going to do that. Now, they're not going to think about it. They're impulsive. They're outgoing. They've got a heart for people. We need to take up $5,000 for the Ojo. Let's go. I'll give the money. And they got $300 in the bank. Mm-hmm. See, they're just that type. So the negative of a Peter, the car salesman, is they just jump into everything. And here's some of the negative qualities. And I'm going to show you how God can change. So you say, well, I'm an outgoing, I'm an introvert, I'm this or that. That's just the way I am, so I have to be that way. No, God can change anyone, and God does change everyone. But notice a Peter. The negatives of a Peter, that type of individual, is they're outspoken. They don't think about what they say. I mean, Peter's always just jumping in there and saying something. They're impulsive. They're egotistical. They think they can do anything. I remember hearing a guy in church testify one time. He's a businessman. He testified, and he said, you know what? He said, I just think about anything that I tried to accomplish in life. I can do it. That's the same with personality. They never consider the fact they may get in over their head. They may not be able to do it. They always think, I can do anything. You've got the egotistical, they're self-seeking, they're a braggart, they're weak-willed. They're the easiest personality to yield to a temptation because they just go with the flow. They go with their emotion and the emotion of the moment. For example, we had a service and we was on our feet, some of us shouting, they'd be on their feet shouting. We had a service where we were weeping and crying, they'd be crying. Whatever the emotion of the moment is, they're there. Okay, that's some maybe of the negatives. But now you take that same guy, Peter, with all the negatives, the guy who denied Christ, the guy who cursed, the guy who cut the ear, trying to cut the ear of Malchus, cut the ear of Malchus off. The Lord, here's a remarkable thing. They go out to arrest the Lord Jesus Christ. This guy, Peter, gets mad, cuts the ear of Malchus off. Jesus puts the ear back and they still arrest him. You know what I'd do? If I went out to arrest somebody and they could take an ear and put it back, I'd leave them alone. Mm-hmm. Peter's that way. Peter doesn't say, well, Lord, what am I going to do with Malchus? Peter grabs a sword and man, if Malchus hadn't moved, it'd been his head off. So that's the negatives of a personality like Peter. But now what does God do with that same personality? Well, in the book of Acts, before Paul really, among the Jewish church, Peter's the leader. Peter, James, and John, they all have their place, but Peter seems like the one they all look to, and they all come to, and they all gravitate to. He's a people person, he's outgoing. So when he gets filled with the Spirit and God changes him, what happens? Peter's the same one that dies for the cause of Christ. He has some courage about him. He's the same one that says in 1 Peter, he said, trials are good for you. Rejoice in trials. It seems like there's a change there in Peter. He's not bragging about himself. He's not saying, I can do it. He's humble. He's submissive. He loves people. He's serving people. He's going after things. That is the change in personality that God does in the life of a Peter. So, sometimes we say to somebody, and you may have children, and our children got 2 boys. Their personalities are different, okay? Maybe in your children, some people's family, they're all the same. Most time it's not. Most time, personalities are different. And sometimes when we say, well, I wish the girl or boy was outgoing or more this or more that, or thought about things, didn't jump into things, was this and that. We wish for personality change, but the truth of the matter is, we can't change our basic personality. An outgoing person is always going to be an outgoing person. An introvert, to some degree, will always be more reserved. But the Spirit of God can take whatever you were birthed with and born with and the characteristics you have in your life and change those around. You see that in Peter. Peter goes from somebody that's up and down, the roller coaster ride of Christianity. At times he's making an A+, thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. At other times he's denying Christ. And yet that same Peter now on the day of Pentecost preaches a tremendous message that God uses to instigate and start the church and formate the church, and 3,000 Jews are born into the family of God, and he's the natural born leader, and he takes leadership of that early church, and eventually he dies for the cause of Christ. So you got the Peter. Look at the Paul. Paul, what's the negatives of a Paul? Let me give you this quick and I'll be done and we'll pick up next week. The negatives of Paul is Paul can be hard to get along with. Paul can be sarcastic. He can be strong-willed. He can be self-sufficient. He can be controversial. And he can be hostile. He can be all those things. That's what the choleric personality is. If you were to look at any of the great generals, most of the generals who have well known, you have, for example, I was reading about Phoenix City, Alabama. Boy, that had a colorful past, didn't it? It was so bad the United States government had to take over. Was anybody alive when they did that? And when Patton was over in Columbus at the base there, he threatened to go over and level the city. It was so bad, so corrupt. But you got a Patton. If you study Civil War history, there's a lot of great generals, but one, if you were to ask in the Civil War, if you were to ask some of the northern generals, who would you most likely would like to see assassinated and out of the way? No, the North, if you were to ask Sherman about who he would, you know who they said? Nathan Bedford Forrest. They called him that devil. Had 13 horses shot out from under him. A choleric personality. Didn't stop. You got a General Patton. Yeah, he walked in there, and yeah, he looked at a guy he didn't think should be in the hospital bed. You know what he did to him? Slapped him. Shouldn't have done that, but that's what he did. That's a Patton. I'll tell you the other side of that. You study the history of Patton, there were guys under him that would give their life for him. So you got the Apostle Paul. You got the negatives of that. But now transform that, him becoming a Christian and filled with the Spirit. What is Paul like after that? See how God turns it around. He's now practical. He is a crusading, motivated, dynamic individual that will get the job done. Paul may do it with Timothy. He may do it with Luke. He may do it with Tychicus. He may do it this way, or that way. He may be in prison. He may be out of prison. He may have to write from prison. He may be free. He may preach here. Paul will get the job done. Is the difference between any, and there's no, if you say, well, I want to be this personality, there's no right personality or wrong personality. They all have their positive and they all have their negatives. But what I'm trying to show to you is that when you deal with the Spirit-filled life, God can change anything. So next week we'll pick it up and we'll talk a little bit more about these and how God can change personalities and a little bit about how to deal with people. Again,